Check it out.
Hey, we are live on YouTube.
Okay, great. Welcome back to the afternoon session of the October 11th, 2022 public hearing and public meeting of the Landmarks Preservation Commission. This meeting is being held via Zoom and live streamed on our YouTube channel. So if you're interested in participating or watching the proceedings, you may do so either by joining the meeting or following along on YouTube. And we are about an hour and a half behind schedule. We will be starting this afternoon with public hearing item number 5, and I will turn it over to our Director of Preservation, Corey Harala, to take us through the agenda this afternoon.
Thanks, Sarah. Public hearing item number 5 is LPC 22-10931, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 623, lot 146, 263 West 11th Street in the Greenwich Village Historic District. This is a Greek revival style row house built in 1836, and the application is to construct an in-ground pool at the rear yard.
Commissioners, the applicants have joined. You now have control of the presentation. Just click on the screen to advance the slides. State your name for the record. You may begin.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. John Wool, Stephen Harris Architects. I'm joined this afternoon with my colleague, Leo Stevens. This is 263 West 11th Street in the Greenwich Village Historic District. Next. The site is located between West 4th and Bleecker Street on the north side of the street. Next. It opens into a relatively large donut of shared houses on both the back of Bank Street and the north side of West 11th Street. Next. The current rear yard is a combination of a glass addition, which was approved by the Commission in 1997, that opens onto an existing lower terrace. There's a stair in that terrace that takes you up to a rear yard, and then adjacent to that, there is another stair that takes you back to the house. Next. The proposed plan reduces the dimension of that existing lower terrace by approximately 5 feet, shifting it closer to the house, and reconfigures the stair into the backyard by sliding it underneath that construction to the east. You'll see here that the pool and the excavation have been located so as to be 5 feet off of the rear lot line, over 9 feet off of the east lot line, and approximately 4'4" off of the west lot line. The pool depth is approximately 4'6" on average. It goes from 7'6" to 3 foot. Next. The photos of the existing rear yard. In the foreground here on the left, you see the glass terrace, you see the sunken court, you see the current stair on the west side of the property going up to the rear yard. In the middle, you see views of that rear yard, and then on the right, you see the space within the rear yard itself. Next. Additional images of the rear yard. Again, this is part of a larger donut with the neighbors' fences and properties growing here with vines. Next. The sunken court currently has a water feature. So this large fountain is the north side or the retaining wall facing the garden. And that's operated as an operating flowing cascading water fountain. Currently, the mechanics for that are in an underground bunker, which will be maintained for the mechanics for the new swimming pool. Next. This axonometric illustrates the relationships between the sunken courtyard, the glass terrace, and the existing yard. Next. And then this is the proposed of that in context. Again, planting being maintained around the perimeter, and the terrace being reworked to become the pool deck. Next. This is a drawing or rendering of the materials in context. So the perimeter will have plantings around it. A number of large trees will be introduced. The courtyard will be reduced by about 5 feet. And the pool will be constructed approximately 4+ feet off of the west, and more than 5 feet, the water surface itself, more than 5 feet off the north, and then 9 feet off the east. None of this work is visible from any of the public right-of-way. Next. This is a section showing again that average depth of about 4'6". 7'6" is the depth at the deep end, and about 3 feet is the depth at the shallower end. Next. This shows the materials that will be used. The dominant material will be this tumbled sandstone. Next. Within the donut itself, there are a number of significant excavations that have been improved in the last number of years. I'd like to review each of those as a precedent. Let's start with 58 Bank Street. 58 Bank Street also has a swimming pool. It is a full width lot excavation, and it has been excavated to 17 feet below the yard, full width, holding back a little bit from the rear lot line, and a swimming pool underneath that garden. This was approved in 2018. Next. This is 269 West 11th Street. This was approved in 2019. This is full width excavation again. This one is approximately 16 or 17 feet below grade, and has a pool as well. Next. 70 Bank Street was approved in 2015. This is approximately 19 feet below the rear yard. It is full width, side to side, and it holds back about 6 feet off of the rear lot line. Next. And then immediately adjacent to us at 265 West 11th is a series of garden terraces and stairs and terracing that has been put in adjacent to the property and adjacent to our rear yard. Next. The commission has also approved swimming pools in the past. This is an application that was approved in 2009. This is in the Cobble Hill Historic District. It is a full backyard pool. Next. Again, showing a section of that in the rear yard. Next. And then in the Greenwich Village Historic District itself, this is 30 Perry Street, a swimming pool that was approved in 2005. Next. Here's the approved drawings. Next. And back to the section, Leo. Thank you, commissioners. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Great, thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Okay, I don't see any questions at this time, so let's see if we have public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to testify on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you. And we will, as always, start with anyone who signed up in advance and then get to everyone else. And so I think I'm now turning it over to Sonia Gior, our Director of Intergovernmental and Community Affairs, to take us through the testimony this afternoon.
Gregory's going to do this one.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that, Gregory.
Sorry for the confusion.
Not a problem. So we will start with Shannon Smiley. So Shannon, if you could just make sure you're off mute and state your name for public record. I am promoting you to panelist now. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Good afternoon, commissioners, and thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Shannon Smiley, and I am the Research and Preservation Associate at Village Preservation, and I am speaking on behalf of our organization today. Village Preservation opposes the proposed installation of a pool at 263 West 11th Street. We are very concerned about a variety of outcomes if the installation were to proceed. To continue the allowance of outdoor in-ground pool installations would, we believe, open a potential Pandora's box with a number of potential negative impacts, from flooding to impacting the structural integrity of adjacent structures to aesthetic. These blocks were clearly not designed with any intention of accommodating backyard pools. First and foremost, we are concerned about the safety and the impact the required digging and excavation could have not only on this property, but other adjacent structures. There are also concerns about the impact that having a pool and the hard surface might have on flooding and water damage to this and adjacent properties. And finally, there are aesthetic concerns. These rear yards were not designed for these types of intrusions, which would presumably need to be covered and not function as a pool for most of the year. Either iteration would significantly affect the look and feel of the rear yard, impacting adjacent properties and the shared donut as well. We strongly caution against the commission approving such an intervention here, both for the precedent it may allow and for the particular impact it would have at this location and on its surroundings. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Shannon, for your time. Next up, we will have Michael Linton. I am promoting you now to panelist, Michael. So if you just unmute your line, state your name for public record, you will have 3 minutes to speak. Well, Michael, are you there? Michael? Okay, so next in line.
1 second, sorry about that.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Thank you, commissioners, and thank you for your hard work. My name is Michael Linton. I live at 265 West 11th Street, next to this proposed addition of a pool. We picked this area because of the historic nature of the district. It is one of the oldest areas in the city, and I know you have all worked hard over the years to preserve it. The houses on our street were built in 1868, and our street and the donut on our block is quite unique because of the mix of early architectural style and the number of well-preserved buildings all nested together. The addition of this pool will disrupt all of this. In fact, it will stick out like a sore thumb. None of the other houses have such an encroachment, and allowing it would set a bad precedent in an area where you have worked so hard to preserve the integrity and history. The application omits what I consider important information. How does the material proposed for the pool look compared to the owner's house, my house, which is French Second Empire style, and the other houses nearby? While we've worked hard to adhere to the original nature of our property, both on the front and in the rear, we have paved with compatible bricks in our backyard. I don't believe the materials in the application are compatible. In fact, I don't believe that choices like terrazzo and the color of pool interior have any relationship with the materials typically used in the district. But we don't really have any way of knowing from this application. This pool is not a small thing, it is huge. It will displace all of the old growth trees and will barely replace the planting, which was already very minimal. To say that this will add planting is misleading and rewards denuding, since this yard is already almost all pavers and cement to begin with. To conclude, this visually disrupts our enjoyment of view and is a distraction to the existing historic building. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael. And next we will have Jamie Linton speaking. So Jamie, I'm promoting you to panelist now. And if you could just make sure your line is on mute and present your name for a public record, you will have 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you, commissioners, for the opportunity to speak. My name is Jamie Linton, and I live at 265 West 11th, just to the west of the applicant. I am alarmed about this proposal for many reasons. My husband spoke about what's visually, you can see visually what I'm concerned about with the 150-year-old property that we own. After we have carefully restored our facades with very close attention to our materials and tried to respect the history of the district in the area, we have come across, some alarming things about, due to weather. And one of the things that we have added, as have many people in the area, is a sump pump in our basement because Sandy and Ida hit this area very, very hard. So we're sort of rethinking everything, as are many people in the area, about what to do in these big weather occasions. We have a sump pump, we've added drainage, we have added a partial green roof to reduce runoff. Meanwhile, we've also learned that in the rear, from a soil report, it is extremely sandy soil. Sandy soil is much less stable than other soil, as you know. That makes the proposed addition here especially frightening. And it's a real threat to our property, not hypothetical, and to the structure of our house. So not only is the installation sort of crazy, dangerous, our building, they have dozens of vibration monitors because there's so much excavation, maybe not dozen, but a dozen. They have to somehow, I don't know how they're going to protect our building, but these huge pylons, 20 feet long or something, are going over our house. They're building like a skyscraper back there. And what does that do to the historic buildings around? But it's really the water threat that poses the scariest risk to us. One reason it's so worrisome is the plan completely neglects to show some things. For instance, the pictures of those pools that were shown, other pools, not the underground pools, the at-grade pools, they show the necessary 5-foot non-slip walkway that's required around a pool. Where is that in this drawing? Where is the 48 high-inch safety fence? If those required elements were properly represented on this plan, there would be no room in this yard for this massive pool, and there would be no room for the planting as shown or the trees as shown. Also, that 5-foot non-slip walkway that's required, it would have to be shown slanting into our yard, because a 5-foot walkway cannot slant into the pool. Pool surrounds, they can't do that. They would flood and get dirty. Everyone who has a pool knows that. So in addition to the surface runoff, of what I'm talking about that's going into our property, there's also the problem of this massive cement and all the holding of this big structure inside the yard, 9,000 gallons of water it's holding. That will completely change the way the yard is normally drained, interfering with the natural sandy.
I'm sorry, you're above 3 minutes.
Okay, one last thing. This pool is approximately 8 to 10 feet above our living space, and would drain directly into our living room if there's a runoff. So we're downhill. Thank you so much. I'm sorry to go over. I didn't talk fast enough. I would respectfully request that you deny this application. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jamie. And finally, we have Caroline Harris. I am promoting you now to panelist, Caroline. So if you just unmute your line, introduce yourself for the record, and you will have 3 minutes to speak.
Hello, there's the video. Good afternoon, commissioners. I'm Caroline Harris, partner at Goldman Harris, and we represent Michael Linton and Jamie Alter Linton, who live next door. In addition to our opposition, I note that certain letters have been submitted to the commission opposing the application, including one written by Malcolm Gladwell, which warrants a good read. His observations are noteworthy and highlight the very important role of LPC at this very pivotal moment for Greenwich Village Historic District relating to this application. Summarizing the letter I sent, first, the application doesn't provide much necessary information or meet the requirements for excavation under section 2-216. What is provided shows that there's a substantial risk to my client's property and the foundations of their historic building. A C of A for excavation should be denied. Most importantly, their SOE plans show an alarming 27-foot long and 15-foot long piles, numerous of piles that are to be installed. These indicate that there is soft, sandy soil, like at a coastline, beneath that's in that lot, as it is in my client's lot. Soft sandy soil is a major risk during excavation, even to install the piles, which seem like they're going to act as retaining walls in the long run. It's unclear how the excavation will be handled or how the piles long-term will affect the adjacent properties that also have these soils conditioned. But even more immediately, how will these 27-foot long and 15-foot long piles get into the backyard? A crane on 11th Street will be needed to lift them over historic structures and drop them into the backyard, which seems like an accident waiting to happen. Landmark should not be willing to take that risk in the historic district. Section 2-16 also requires compliance with the building code. My client already explained how their plans do not comply with the 5-foot walkway and the impact of pitching the walkway away from the pool as required by code. This pitching away from the pool immediately abutting the lot line means that on a regular basis, water will spill into my client's yard during a hurricane or serious storm, especially coupled with wind. There's a terrible risk of flooding the yard of the Linton's building itself and potentially damaging their foundations. This is a serious concern. Landmark should take this seriously and again, turn down the application. Second, whether you consider this as a rear yard addition under section 2-215, which I assert is legally warranted, or as a standard certificate of appropriateness, it should be denied. Although the applicant has finally come up with one example of a swimming pool in Greenwich Village, virtually all of his other examples are underground pools, and this would be a precedent and be viewed as another reason to add more swimming pools, not only generally in Greenwich Village, but specifically on this block, which would adversely impact the rears of the existing buildings with the wrong palette, elimination of landscaping, and it is wrong environmentally to do this. The question of appropriateness of this application is not just about the impact on architectural features. The commission may also consider other matters of aesthetic, historical, and architectural values of significance. The designation report for Greenwich Village preserves not only the architecture, but the spirit and character of Greenwich Village, its unique and aesthetic and historic value, which would be altered by allowing this swimming pool and other swimming pools in the district. Therefore, not only should this application be denied categorically, Landmark should establish a rule prohibiting above grade open swimming pools in Greenwich Village. Thank you for your listening to our testimony.
Okay, thank you so much, Caroline, for that. And to note, we received a resolution from Community Board 2 in Manhattan regarding this issue, and they recommend denial due to potential risk to the neighboring historic properties in the course of construction, as well as lack of fit to the historical context of this district. And we also received a joint letter from Assembly Member Deborah Glick, as well as Council Member Eric Botcher and Senator Brad Hoylman recommending denial. They also mentioned the risk of flooding and property damage, as well as the lack of historical fit. And they recommend the applicant receiving a permit from DOB to mitigate those risks. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'd like to turn back to the applicant and ask if you'd like to respond to these comments.
Certainly. Thank you. Thank you, Chair Carroll. Leo, can you pull up that SOE plan that we were talking about? So all of the work here has been engineered by our SOE engineer, GZA, and they have produced what I'm about to show you, which is this plan, which is carefully engineered. And as I've mentioned before, there are much wider and much deeper excavations that have been successfully completed and approved on this block. There are actually 3 others that are full width, much deeper excavations. Next, Leo. And then this is the monitoring plan that has been produced, which will help monitor the work as it proceeds. Back to the section if we can. So I think that one thing to point out as well is that there are 2 other swimming pools that are already in this donut. They are subterranean, but the questions raised by the neighbors about water would apply to that as well. And we are not aware of any ill incidents that have happened as a result of those pools being located there. Lastly, I would say relative to village preservation, I would say that this will not be unprecedented as we've shown. There is a precedent 2 blocks away. It's been there for 17 years. No one seemed to have known that it even was there because no one has been paying attention. It doesn't seem to me that this is happening very frequently in the village. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And John, can you just also speak to the 5-foot surrounding area and how that is incorporated into your plan or not?
Yeah, this is going through LPC is all part of the approval necessary for DOB. And so the plan as laid out with the 5-foot rear and the 5-foot back, the landscaping is considered to be an area that can be walked in order to provide safety should someone need to be rescued.
Okay. Commissioners, do we have any other questions? All right, I'm not seeing any questions, so I'm sending you all a request to unmute so that we can begin our discussion. And let me see, Commissioner Devonshire, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved, Sarah.
Thank you. And Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And, as we know, in rear yards, we review at staff level changes from paving to plantings and different paving patterns in the rear yard. So whether it's planted or paved is not necessarily, or something else is not necessarily the question before us, but it is a question of the pool excavation, which we do review, and we do require that you pull excavation back from the rear lot line to ensure the ability for potential deep planting. And as the applicant has presented, we have also approved pools in this particular block, a subterranean, but I think would have similar structural provisions in place and similar sandy soil. And we have approved also pools at the rear yard level. I think once in this district and another in Cobble Hill Historic District. And I think that I might be forgetting others, but so there is some precedent for excavation and for pools. And certainly we've approved excavation for other uses as well, below buildings and in the rear yards. And as always, excavation would have to be monitored very closely by the Department of Buildings and approved by them. But it is something that we also look at carefully to the extent that we can, although DOB is the expert on structural issues. So we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Chapin, would you like to start this one?
I thought you might start with me, Sarah. Yeah, we have certainly approved pools in the past. I've been present for a number of those. It's a relatively new feature over the last, more than a decade that I've been on the commission. But, we have approved them. And we certainly also approve underground excavations, enlarging cellars and other things that we've seen. And as you reflected, we obviously want to be sure that the due care is taken with regard to these, and the Department of Buildings is closely supervising it, as well as the applicants' engineering firms. As looking at the design for the exterior, it actually in general seems to be perfectly suitable, appropriate. The landscaping and other fixtures are attractive. The way the underground design is set up, which builds on a previous application we approved, seems to me appropriate. I understand the concern of the neighbors about the possibility of a breach in the pool, but obviously that's not exactly something within our jurisdiction. And as the applicant represented, that has not been a problem with any of the other pools that I'm aware of that were installed near residences. So really don't find any fault with this application as a design proposition. And I don't think the fact that it's a built pool, if it were a, let's say, not a swimming pool, but a water feature built in the back of a garden, I don't think we would have an objection to it, or I would have an objection to it as being inappropriate to the context. So I think I will support it.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioner Devonshire?
I can support it. Sarah, my chief concerns would be danger to the adjacent properties during construction, and the aspect of it being sandy soil is something that would be investigated by a geotechnical engineer and would be necessary in order to get a DOB permit for this. So that it's not really an issue for me. I think everything else about it is approvable.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with the commissioners. The obviously is beyond our jurisdiction in terms of the soil, and that's DOB and the engineers. So I'm in agreement with the other commissioners.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Bland?
There's not much more to say. I'm in agreement with what's been said, but I will add that the construction of this seems much less risky, if there is even such a risk after DOP approvals and monitoring, than the deep excavations of so many houses, not just in this historic district, but many others. So I don't view this as an undue risk at all. Of course, there's always a risk of anything happening, but I don't view this as getting close to what we for in the way of excavations.
Right, particularly below the buildings themselves.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Okay, Commissioner Lutfi?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with what's been said by my fellow commissioners. I can approve this.
Okay, Commissioner Gustafson?
Same here.
Okay, Commissioner Shamir Baron?
Yes, I think what's being proposed is appropriate.
Okay, all right, so I think we all agree and can move ahead with this approval. So Commissioner Chapin, would you make the motion?
Okay. In the matter of a certificate of appropriateness, Borough of Manhattan, LPC 22-10931, 260 West 11th Street, Greenwich Village Historic District, McReeker Row House built in 1836. Application is to construct an in-ground pool at the rear yard. I note that the building's style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Greenwich Village Historic District. I recommend approval, finding that the proposed work will not be visible from a public thoroughfare and will not damage or eliminate any significant architectural or historic features of the building or site. That the proposed excavation will be done in compliance with Department of Buildings regulations under the supervision of a licensed professional engineer to protect nearby buildings. That the excavation will be limited in footprint and depth and will not impede upon the overall open character of the central green space. That a 5-foot wide unexcavated section of the yard will be retained at the rear of the site, and that the proposed work will not detract from the special architectural and historic character of the building, site, or Greenwich Village Historic District.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Devonshire, would you second this motion?
Second.
All right, Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Baron,
I'm sorry, aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Oh, she's gone, Mark.
Oh, she went. Sorry. That the motion passes with 8 in favor and none opposed.
Okay, so that's approved. Thank you. And we'll move to the next item.
Thank you, commissioners.
Next item is public hearing item number 6, LPC 22-12020. An application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 501, lot 8, 427 to 429 West Broadway in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District. This is a pair of Italianate style store and warehouse buildings designed by Robert Mook and built in 1872. And the application is to replace entrance infill and install a security gate.
And the applicants have joined the hearing. You now have control of the presentation. Please state your name for the record. Click to advance the slides and you may begin.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This is Gilles Depardon from Ogawa Depardon Architects. We're having a hard time figuring out how to put our address in there in the title, so please bear with me. It's 429 West Broadway. It is a cast iron building in Soho on the east side of West Broadway. And the application is to remove an existing storefront entrance into a shop, into an existing, actually a furniture shop, and replace it with what the client and I think are a slightly more appropriate entrance. The current entrance, I don't know if we can flip through. Do we flip through or do you guys flip through? I'm sorry.
You just click the screen and then you can flip through the slides.
Thank you. Are you able to flip? There we go. So this is the building itself. The current facade is the current entrance, I should say, and that's all we're actually talking about is a glass storefront, which is actually almost like a shower door. It is literally one thick pane of glass with no weather stripping of any kind. It is actually filled into what used to be an aluminum framed window and door that was there previous to this entrance that they created several years ago. They would like to replace it, and you can flip to the next page, just flip it. So that's the side views up and down the sidewalk with the signage off of the facade, which is frankly not part of this application. Keep going. This is the enclosure, so it's a red glass enclosure, and as you can see on the top right pictures, you can see the blocking, the wood blocking that was attaching it directly to the metal frame that you see in the bottom right-hand picture. That used to be the original door. So they kept the original aluminum frame and just infilled with this glass enclosure to create their new entrance to the store several years ago. Go ahead, flip it. Next one. Those are the tax photos, which really don't show very much, unfortunately. Keep going. So this is the existing as it is currently, which is a door which is roughly 8'9" tall, but let's call it the floor to transom height is almost 13 feet. What we'd like to do is replace that entire entranceway with a vestibule, which is weather enclosed, meaning actually creating walls on both sides, with a gate that's built into this enclosure, and then a more or less full height door with transom to the 13 feet. It's slightly lower because there's actually a lower ceiling of about 9 inches inside, and you can see that where we have the 429 written on the top, that is actually the ceiling height. So we are going to create a little soffit up there, but basically it's a full height thing. The view of the right-hand corner is the shutters that are in the shut position. But when they're in the open position, if you could zoom in on the doors, you can sort of see that they tuck in neatly into the walls. And so we're therefore not seen at all when they are in the open position. That's essentially the application. The materials are going to be, we're going to use a cast iron bullet and glass, which you can see final OSO for the floor. And all the other materials are going to be a kind of matching blackened stainless steel. It's an acid etched stainless steel that matches the same finish. We have a sample we can show you. And then a glass door, it's stainless steel glass door. So that's the bullet glass. The bottom little rectangle is actually the stainless steel that we're planning to use, which is this blackened finish. keep going one more. This is just to show you some examples of doors in Soho. Most of them on West Broadway that are tall and skinny doors, more modern doors, which is, just precedents that have been done. Some of these are actually on the west side of the street, which I know was not landmarked for a long time. So that's what that is. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, commissioners, do we have any questions? All right, I don't see any questions at this time, so let's see if we have public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you, and I will turn it over to Sonia Gior to take us through the testimony. If there
Thank
is
you.
any.
So we do not have any signups in advance for this item, and I'm not seeing any hands raised presently. So I'll note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 2 has withdrawn their right to speak on this application. And I'll turn it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay. All right, I think they just withdrew the application for, we're not sure why. Okay. And maybe the applicant can explain. I don't know. Let me turn back to the applicant. I think, did you go to the community board or?
We did go to the community board. I think they had an objection with they were fine with the doors and the enclosure. They had some questions about the actual gates, thinking that the gates were a little too opaque, let's call them. They're a perforated metal panel, again, that sits neatly, into the walls when they're open. We're having a lot of vagrant issues with that little vestibule right now, which is why they wanted to have an enclosure that basically keeps people out.
Okay. All right. And of course, in Soho, there are historic shutters that were solid historically, right? So there is something to sort of a shuttered door in this district. Okay, well, let me move on. And commissioners, if there are no other questions, we'll move to the discussion, which is sort of where I'm heading already. So, all right, Commissioner Devonshire, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
Moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Chen, would you second that motion?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, so the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. I started to think out loud in advance, so apologies for that. But we're looking at the new door and the shuttered gates in front of it that will slide in when they're open, and when closed will have a perforated design, which is interesting. We have seen perforated metal panels on storefronts before and have approved it sort of at the base of storefronts as being evocative of cast iron and glass vault lights. So that use of that in a sort of abstract way has been something we've seen in the NoHo Historic District anyway. So let's begin our discussion. Commissioner Shamir Barron, would you like to start this one?
Sure. I think firstly, I understand the reasons that they're wanting to rethink the vestibule, and I think that the idea of a nearly full height door elements is in keeping with the Soho cast iron general language of, as you began to mention, both shutters, but also kind of opaque between pier, whatever it might be. Sometimes it was sort of infill, sometimes it was behind, forward of an elevator.
Right.
But I think that what you end up seeing kind of is something familiar here. The perforation is a little bit different, but as you said, we've sort of seen a version of that before. In general, I think it's I think it's appropriate and I can approve it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chapin?
I agree completely with Commissioner Schumer Barron, and I also think that it's very evocative. So, of the cast iron district, some of the elements of it. So I can approve it as presented.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Devonshire?
Inventive and appropriate.
Thanks. Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, likewise here. Very nicely done, given the times we live in.
Commissioner Bland?
I agree. This is appropriate.
Commissioner Lutfi?
Agree, it's appropriate.
Commissioner Gustafson.
Appropriate.
Okay, so I think we all agree on this one as well. Commissioner Shamir Barron, would you make the motion? Oh, I think.
I
are you
keep
muted?
muting myself, I'm sorry. In the matter of LPC 22-12020, 427 to 429 West Broadway, Soho Cast Iron Historic District, a pair of Italianate style store and warehouse buildings designed by Robert Mook and built in 1872. And the application is to replace entrance infill and install a security gate. I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Soho Cast Iron Historic District, and I recommend approval. Finding that the proposed work will not eliminate or damage any significant architectural features, that the perforated metal panel doors will be evocative of fire shutters and vault covers, which were sometimes historically present at store and warehouse buildings of this age and style, that the largely glazed infill and limited signage set deep within the opening at a single storefront bay will have a discrete presence at the ground floor of the facade, and that the design and detail of the infill and signage will be compatible with the modern infill at the neighboring bays.
Thank you. And Commissioner Chapin, would you second that motion?
Second.
Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Aye.
With 8 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
So that's approved. Thank you. And we'll move to the next item.
Thank you.
Next item is public hearing item number 7, LPC 23-02334, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 504, Lot 19, 202 6th Avenue in the Sullivan Thompson Historic District. These are two buildings altered circa 1960. The application is to modify a masonry opening, construct a wall and canopy at the rear yard, and install signage and lighting.
The applicants have joined the hearing. You have control of the presentation. Click on the slide to advance through it. Please unmute yourself, state your name for the record, and you may begin. And please don't hit escape. Let me just bring it back into full screen, please. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Hello, everybody. My name is Greg Merkel from iCrave Design. I'm pleased to present the application for the exterior work of Planta Restaurant. The interior is currently being renovated. Assisting me will be Stephen Salm, the restaurant owner, as well as Tony Pilhoun, who is on the architecture team. Planta is 100% plant-based restaurant, and their mission is to make an impact by celebrating the powers of plants. They work tirelessly to continuously expand their influence, championing plant-based living, as well as to better our health, our communities, and our planet. This will be the second Planta restaurant in New York City. The first one is in Nomad on 27th Street and 5th Avenue. We designed that one as well. That is in another landmark district. We presented to the community board on September 19th, 2022, and received quite a bit of feedback on the presentation. After discussions with the restaurant owner, we decided to revise the design significantly, which will hopefully address most of the issues that came up at the previous presentation. The restaurant is located on the ground floor at the southeast corner of Avenue of the Americas and Prince Street in the Sullivan Thompson Historic District here. There are two white brick buildings owned by the same entity, a 6-story building on the corner and a 4-story building on Prince Street. In this, between the buildings is an open courtyard, which we'll be using for outdoor seating. There are two white brick buildings owned, The buildings were redeveloped and reclad in white brick by the architect named David Krause in the 1960s. The December 2016 Thompson Sullivan Historic District Report notes the buildings as non-contributing, meaning they do not contribute to the historic district sense of place. The style is noted as no style. You can also see on this page in the lower right-hand corner here, that there used to be a white brick low wall that spanned between these two buildings. We'll tie into this later. Here you can see a plan of the restaurant shaded in gray and the courtyard highlighted in yellow. The space was a florist shop up until recently with a metal and plywood wall between the buildings. The wall had a roll down shutter. In 2019, the Landmarks Preservation Commission approved a steel and glass reworking of the entire ground floor, including in both buildings and the courtyard area. You can see that here. We are therefore proposing a modest design that brings back the white brick wall from the 1960s. You can see our proposal. You can see the original white brick wall from the 80s here. The wall has a storefront of double doors, flanking windows, and transom panels above. As this wall is a design that reverts to the previous iteration, we hope this can be approved with greater ease. The other elements, the halo lit signage, the bracket sign, these will follow the LPC signage guidelines, so we hope that those can also be approved with greater ease. The new brick wall would match, the new brick would be a match to the existing in pattern as well as color, with a header course every 5 running bond courses. Above the brickwork would be a 4-inch stone capping that you see here, similar to the capping at the top of the Prince Street building as shown here. You can see that building here in the capping. We want to support the street wall. So the new wall is coplanar with the walls of the adjacent buildings. Just the doors are recessed for code reasons. The doors, when open, cannot protrude more than 18 inches into the public domain. The door frames would be black metal, the same color as the design approved in 2019, and a match to the building's existing window frames. We want to harmonize with what is already there. We are also planning to extend the existing fire escape in the courtyard to the front of the building, where you can see the proposed drop-down ladder here, right next to the existing one on the right, so that in an emergency, the tenants can exit directly into the sidewalk, similar to the fire escapes on the rest of the building, instead of into the courtyard and then out to the sidewalk. Inside the courtyard, the boarded up masonry opening on the west wall would be bricked up with a slight recess to signify that a window was once there. The masonry opening on the right would be changed to a door and a window and would not directly align with the windows above, similar to the 6th Avenue entryway to the upstairs apartments that you'll see here in a second. So these are the openings, bricked up, new door and window here. This is the 6th Avenue side, where you can see the restaurant entry door, new sconces, new blade bracket sign. As well, you can see that there is a non-aligning door. This is the main entry door into the apartment, which does not align to the windows above. Here you can see our new wall and elevation with the surrounding buildings for scale and its elements and dimensions. The plan is to add sconces along the Prince Street side to add lighting for safety and to improve the street wall on the street. This is the spec for the sconces as planned, simple and understated. Here you can see a closer up elevation of our planned wall with dimensions for signage. We adhered to LPC signage guidelines as closely as possible. Signage consists of pin mounted letters above the entry door here, as well as 2 top-lit bracket signs, one on the Prince Street side, as you see here, one on the 6th Avenue elevation that we saw before. They are close to the entrances and also adhere to the LPC guidelines. We did the same sign on 27th Street that adhered to the LPC guidelines. The wording, the signage, our words is made up of halo lit pin mounted channel letters. The letter sizes 6 inches and 12 inches are 6 inches and 12 inches high. They stand 2 inches off the wall. The bracket sign is shown here. It is 18 inches high, 2 inches wide, with a 5-inch wide mounting plate, and it stands 19 inches off the wall. The finish would be rose gold. The signs are top lit, as mentioned, with a specified fixture. This view shows the reverse angle, or sorry, we show here another view of what it looks like from Prince Street. And this view is the reverse, or it's an angle that shows the roller cover set behind the wall. It is comprised of rolling frames with glass panels. It will remain stacked during nicer weather and unstacked during inclement weather. Protecting patrons from the elements, the motor and rolling mechanisms are essentially silent. The fire escape platform extension and the ladder are also visible in this view, extension ladder. Finally, this view from the back shows the various elements, including the roller cover, sliding glass cover. This is not, I just want to confirm, this is not visible from the street, other than looking through the windows. We understand that there are certain elements that will be reviewed by the DOB for code compliance, like door sizes, exit pathway, distances, etc., and the State Liquor Authority for operational issues such as background music or operating hours. We have been working separately on these items and assure compliance. Our focus here are items that pertain to landmarks, Preservation Commission issues. There's another couple pages that just show the existing neighborhood, the existing block on Prince Street to show context.
It can be field applied.
This being our building and our site.
Okay,
And
thank
that's
you.
it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, commissioners, do we have any questions? All right, I don't see any questions at this time, so why don't we see if we have public testimony? If you're in the meeting and would like to testify on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you, and I will turn it over to Sonia Gior to take us through the testimony.
Great, thank you. So we do not have any signups in advance, and I'm not seeing any hands raised presently. So I will note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 2 recommended denial of the roll cover, the design of the street wall, the blade sign, and the infill wall sign. And we also received 3 letters in opposition to the application expressing concerns over the facade as contextually inappropriate and the indoor space expansion. And I'll turn it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'd like to turn back to you, Mr. Merkel, and ask if you'd like to respond to the comments. I know you had an earlier design, and that may be what you presented at the community board. If that is, you can explain that.
Yeah, I think those are in reference to what was presented before, which was a design that while it was interesting and looked good, it was deemed not appropriate for the neighborhood. And so like I stated in the beginning of my presentation, we went back and really we're trying to think of how to best make this really truly appropriate for not only the neighborhood, but for the site. And we came across that image that was that showed the wall that used to exist in a location that was the same white brick as the 2 neighboring buildings, and thought that was probably the most appropriate thing to put there.
Okay, thank you. All right, commissioners, do we have any final questions? All right, I am going to ask you all to unmute yourselves so we can move to our discussion then. So Commissioner Gustafson, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Chen, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And this is an interesting corner in the Sullivan-Thompson Historic District with these 2 buildings that were identified by the commission as non-contributing, both clad in white brick. And as the applicant presented, we did see an earlier proposal to integrate storefronts into the ground floor of both buildings and a storefront wall linking the 2 buildings. And that was approved a few years ago. That project never moved forward. And this is a new proposal to do an infill wall between the 2 buildings with a seasonal space behind it that has a retractable ceiling. And the white brick, as the applicant said, is based on an old photograph of a white brick wall that was found in this location in the historic photo, an earlier photo, I should say. And this sort of retractable glazed roof is something we have seen at commercial ground floor restaurants and commercial properties in some of our other historic districts, like Greenwich Village, I think, and Park Slope, where in the rear yards there is an enclosed roof that retracts to allow outdoor dining in the seasonal weather. So the proposal also includes some signage and lighting as well. So we'll go ahead and have this discussion. Commissioner Lutfi, would you like to start this one?
Sure. This is a big difference from what we had approved, which I remember thinking was very interesting. But this is, I think, not only interesting, but very well done in an understated and sort of discreet way. It in no way, it completely blends in with what is there, and it makes very efficient use of whatever available space exists. So I like the use of the white bricks. I hope they can match pretty closely. I think the sconces are, very understated. The retractable roof is really smart, and it's nice that it's off the street. I think it's well done. I can approve this.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Gustafson.
Yeah, I saw the comparison to what we approved previously, and then my reaction was, what were we thinking? This is a great use of a non-contributing building. It's a much improved proposal. It's a terrific use of a gap in a street wall and a way to fill it. It conforms. It improves on what's there. It does no damage, and it activates the street. I'm all in.
Okay, great. Thank you. Commissioner Shamir Baran.
I agree. This is a really interesting design, and it's appropriate for the location.
Thank you. Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, I remember the previous proposal, which I like some aspects of, but would have liked a few changes in. And I really think I really like this. I think this is great. I think it's just right. So happy to approve it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Devonshire.
Excellent. I can approve it.
Commissioner Chen.
Likewise here. I agree with Commissioner Gustafson. What were we drinking?
Oh, wasn't that long ago. Yeah. Commissioner Bland.
Was that drinking or thinking? I love to say this is a great scheme, approvable scheme, appropriate scheme for two non-contributing buildings.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I think we are in agreement here. So Commissioner Lutfi, would you make a motion?
Sure. In the matter of docket 23-02334, can you hear that noise in the background?
Just a little bit. Doesn't sound distracting.
Okay, 202 6th Avenue, Sullivan Thompson Historic District. Two buildings altered circa 1960. The application is to modify a masonry opening, construct a wall and canopy at the rear yard, and install signage and lighting. I note that the building does not contribute to the special architectural or historic character of the Sullivan Thompson Historic District. I recommend approval, finding that the modified masonry opening at the rear facade of the building will only be visible at oblique angles from Prince Street and will only remove a limited amount of plain brickwork. That the proposed storefront facade will replace a deteriorated utilitarian roll-up security gate, thereby enhancing the streetscape. That the presence of a street wall facade at this gap between buildings set flush with adjacent facades will reinforce the continuous street wall of the block. That the materiality of the facade featuring off white brickwork, a cast stone coping stone, and black finished metal storefront infill will be in keeping with the materials found at the adjacent buildings and will help it to blend in with its context. That the configuration of the storefront infill, featuring a recessed entrance flanked by display windows and transoms, will recall those aspects of historic storefronts found in the historic district in a contemporary way. That the proposed retractable glass canopy will be simple in design and screened from view by the wall, thereby helping it to remain as discreet presence at the rear yard. That the proposed signage featuring black finished halo lit pin mounted letters will be well scaled and in keeping with the signage found throughout the historic district. That the proposed sconces will be small in size, simple in design, typical in terms of placement and finish, and will not call undue attention to themselves. That the fire escape drop ladder will feature a neutral finish and will be seen in the context of other fire escapes, helping it remain a discrete presence within the streetscape, and that the work will not detract from the special architectural and historic character of the Sullivan-Thompson Historic District.
Thank you. And Commissioner Gustafson, would you second that motion?
Second.
Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Baron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Aye.
With 8 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes. So that's approved. Thank you. And we'll move to the next item.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next item is public hearing item number 8, LPC 22-12121. An application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 1869, lot 7502. 780 West End Avenue in the Riverside West End Historic District Extension 2. This is an arts and crafts style apartment building designed by George and Edward Blum and built in 1912 to 14. The application is to establish a master plan governing the future installation of windows.
And just waiting on staff to join. Oh, there he is.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Richard Lowry, Preservation staff. So the proposal, as Corey mentioned, is the master plan for windows at 780 West End Avenue. As you can see from the historic tax photograph on the left, the historic configuration of a number of windows are 2/2, if you can see on the corner. And then there are some very wide windows which have a 3/3 configuration. Previously, the commission heard last year an application for a single apartment to install 1/1 windows, and that was approved with modifications to go back to the historic configuration, and comments were made that a single apartment would look odd. So consequently, the owners of the building have come in for a full-scale master plan, and they are proposing to go with 1/1 double-hung windows. Just to give you some shots of the courtyards on the front facades, there are basically 2 historic windows remaining, and which are at the courtyard. You can see in the bottom left corner. And here are the proposed elevations. you can see from certain bays where they put in paired windows, and that's again not a historic configuration. They were sort of a single window, and they were installed prior to designation, just with a as a cost-saving exercise, because again these are fairly large, very wide openings. There are some work proposed for through wall louvers. However, these shown on the elevations are considered to be approvable at staff level. So it's only the windows that are being proposed at the hearing. And then here are the detailed window elevations and sections. The architect, Helga Furman, is here to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Commissioners, do we have any questions? All right, I don't see any. Oh, yes, here we go. Commissioner Shamir Barron, please go ahead.
Thank you. So basically, no, they're not proposing any replacement with the 3/3 configuration. Is that right?
That's right. It's a master plan for 1/1 double hung windows.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? All right, let's see if we have public testimony, and then we'll ask the applicant to respond. If you're in the meeting, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you, and I will turn it over to Sonia Gior to take us through the testimony.
Thank you. We do have several folks signed up to speak. We'll start with Reverend Kay Carpin from the Community Board. I'll be promoting you to panelists now. And if you can please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
All right, thank you very much. I'll be brief. Our community board considered this proposal thoroughly. I think it's fair to say we mourn the loss of the original divided light windows, but we recognize that those are long gone, and we appreciate the effort at a window master plan. So we do recommend approval of this by a vote of 32 in favor and 1 opposed. We also did look at the window sleeves and appreciate that the proposal for the AC sleeves are in the plain brick areas and not the more decorative areas. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Sean Corsandi from the Landmark West. I'll be promoting you to panelists now. If you can please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Good afternoon, Commissioner. Sean Corsandi for Landmark West. Often, Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee is asking for applicants to prepare a windows master plan. Here, the applicant has invested great effort in organization and planning for its stewardship to do so, and we thank them. The master plan will again standardize the 4 primary window sizes of this landmark, allowing the building to read more clearly without visual distractions from variant, often split window types and sizes in what are the 12 consistent bays of this building, 12 floors of consistent bays. This effort will be most greatly noticeable in the B and C series. The width of these windows, however, does read as wide. Returning the vertical muntins would further accentuate the 9 vertical columns of window bays on each the West 98th Street and West End Avenue facades. This is a one-time opportunity to get the windows right or codify them to never again meet the architect's intent. The Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee recommends approval with modifications, as you previously have for this landmark on September 28th, 2021, to incorporate the muntins back into the Blum design. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Helen Freeman from the Historic Districts Council. And Helen, I'll be promoting you to panelists now. And if you can please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Okay. Hello, Helen Freeman, Historic Districts Council. HDC finds the proposed 1/1 windows to be inappropriate. The historic photo clearly shows how the windows should be configured. HDC also believes that an aluminum-clad wood window would be more appropriate product for this building. Thank you.
Thank you. And our next speaker will be John Graham from the Victorian Society. And John, I'll be promoting you to panelist now. And if you can please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. John Graham for the Victorian Society in New York. We find the proposed window master plan inappropriate. Windows are important design features of historic buildings, and we must assume that the original window configurations were intentional on the part of the architect. There appears to be no reason not to match the historic window configurations and details in this case, if not the material. The presentation gives us little graphic information about the historic appearance of the building. The applicant drew very schematic elevations of 2 types of historic windows without architectural context and got the proportions of the wide windows wrong. The drawing shows nearly equal divisions, but it appears that the central pane in these windows was considerably wider than the side panes, as would be expected on a 1912 arts and crafts style building. Accurate historic, existing, and proposed building elevations side by side should be provided in order to properly assess the proposal. Please consider, Commissioners, that if you approve incorrect windows today, the building will never go back. We find the proposed master plan for through-the-wall HVAC units appropriate, as the units seemed logically arranged and appear to avoid decorative brick, stone, and terracotta. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. So we do not have any other speakers signed up in advance, and I'm not seeing any hands raised presently. So I will note that we also received a letter from the West End Preservation Society in which they commend the commitment to the master plan, though feel as though returning the original window pattern of divided light to be 3/3 instead of 1/1 would be more beneficial. And I'll turn it back to you, Chair Carroll.
All right, thank you very much. And I would like to actually turn to the applicant and give them the opportunity to speak to us about their proposal and respond to any of the comments they've heard.
Good afternoon. My name is Helge Furman, and I'm working with the building and the ownership on this master plan. And we're proposing the 1/1 windows because we think that the building has a robust masonry detail that gives it enough scale and texture to the facade. And the windows are quite in a deep recess. What makes the divided lights that were historically there are less important. And we also think that the rich ornamentation of the brickwork around, especially the wider windows, is that there's so much ornamentation around the wider windows that the 1/1 windows will not adversely affect the impression and the look of the building. And regarding the material, it's just much more practical going with aluminum windows and not with wood windows in such a building, because the wood windows just do not hold up as well on especially higher up floors.
Okay, Commissioners, do we have any final questions? All right, I'm not seeing any questions, so we'll move to our discussion. All right, Commissioner Chapin, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And as you know, we have our long history of reviewing applications for windows where the historic windows are all virtually have been replaced, with the majority of them have been replaced prior to designation. And in the past have approved many master plans for 1/1 double hung windows in the spirit that returning a 1/1 window with a uniform fenestration with better profiles and a better color was a satisfactory replacement for getting back the original configuration, even on a piecemeal basis. And then in more recent years, as you know, we have started to drill down on that a little bit more, and we have approved that in some instances where the buildings are very decorative and robust, and the configuration wasn't seen as necessarily the most important characteristic of the style of the building, or that the building could support a 1/1 and still have its style. And then in buildings that are simpler or plainer or of a certain style where that multi-light configuration really was needed to express the style, we have not approved the 1/1 as a master plan. So in this case, that will be part of the question, is whether this particular building in this style can support a 1/1 configuration and still have a style, have its style be legible. And we'll also look at the profiles and the finish. Just in terms of material, I do want to say that we heard testimony about aluminum clad wood being preferable, or even wood being preferable. And I want to point out that if the applicant were proposing the historic configuration, the staff could approve an aluminum window here. So it's not the material that is before us, it really is the configuration. And then the final thing I'll say is that in some cases, we have also approved for a master plan, a sort of modified version of the historic configuration. So, a multi-light over a single light, 3/1 or 2/1 in lieu of 3/3 or 3/2 as a compromise. So that may be also something that some of you think of. It may be appropriate in this particular building. So I think we always have varying opinions here, and I expect we will as we have our discussion on this application. So we'll go ahead and start. Commissioner Bland, would you like to start this one?
You're picking on me. I think this is borderline, but I think the community board point of view, which I understood to be supporting this, better to have consistency and the master plan than not. And maybe it's an expedient position that I have, but I think I can support this too. So that's what I'm.
Okay. All right, Commissioner Lutfi.
So it's funny because I would normally, when a building has changed so many of its windows, I would normally be an advocate for just keeping the 1/1s, and have oftentimes, been the odd man out, except maybe for Fred. But in this instance, where 1/1s are being recommended, I'm kind of scratching my head because there are a lot of original windows here.
No, I think there are only 2 left, right?
In the entire
Corey,
building?
is that right?
Right.
In the entire building?
That was my understanding.
Then I'm reading this incorrectly.
Yes, there are only 2 old
Okay.
wood windows in there on the inside.
right.
of the-
You
I'm gonna
cannot, you can't speak, yeah.
Yeah, we've closed the hearing, but I did
that's
ask if Corey or the staff person could just confirm that.
Yeah, they are courtyard windows. There are none on the primary facades. So
Yeah, they're courtyard windows. Yeah, there are a lot of courtyard windows, but they are original windows.
And are those could be replaced at staff level with 1/1, is that right? Because they're non-visible, or are they visible?
No, they're
Let me confer with the staff on this, but my understanding we're just looking at the primary facade windows today.
okay. Well, then that seems very strange to me.
Yeah, I mean, we have, because secondary facades are usually on secondary, like less designed facades and are obliquely or minimally visible, or are usually not visible. It's not unusual for us to approve a master plan with one configuration on the primary facades and a simplified configuration on secondary facades.
Well, I'm just guessing what will happen here is that if we approve 1/1s, then they'll come back for the courtyards and say, we'd like to do that 1/1, 2 will match.
Right, and probably many of those would be eligible for a staff level approval because of their lack of visibility.
So, okay, on this particular building, my preference would actually be to go back to the original, but that said, I'm willing to go along with whatever the commissioners think on this.
Okay. Commissioner Gustafson?
Okay, so I guess I'm going to take the inexpedient position, which is to say, I think we have a unique moment here, and it's, forever right or forever wrong. And I agree with the testimony, in particular from Landmark West. It's a one-time opportunity. The windows that were there's a uniqueness factor to those windows and to the window openings, to the original windows and the size of the window openings. The facade does have a little bit of style, but a good part of that style comes in, as we see in the historic picture, from the configuration of the windows. So on the 2 street-facing facades, I would ask that they go back to the original configuration.
Okay. Commissioner Shamir Barron?
I am so conflicted. About 7 minutes ago, I was sure that that I was in agreement with Commissioner Gustafson, which is to say that it really is that the 3/3 is really unique and special, and a kind of a really distinguishing feature of the building, and that those should be included in the master plan, unlike what's being proposed. But my other sense is that the other really interesting and important aspect of the building are the oversized windows. And it seems as though if you actually just do the 1/1 and allow for the master plan to replicate that in a sense you're kind of underscoring or accentuating that overscale, the size of those openings. And so does that then sort of reinforce the original elevation intention? It's really hard for me to figure this out. So I'm leaning towards requesting that they model out the 3/3, that 3/3 is the way to proceed, but I'd love to hear some more commissioners' input.
Okay, all right. Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, I was somewhat conflicted about this as well, because this is such a beautiful building.
It is.
Figure out which direction benefits it. And I'm coming down on the side of the fact that it is, as the presentation noted, it just has so much fantastic detail. And even the way the brickwork is, it's a very almost ornate building. And I think it can not only survive having windows with fewer buttons, but also that, as Commissioner Shimmer Barron was just saying, that perhaps the openness of the larger windows can really reinforce sort of the punched openings in a way that makes it even is even the equal of what it would have been or better than returning to the original. So I think I'd be comfortable with going along with the way it was presented, and certainly with regard to the air conditioning units, organizing those is a big plus, obviously, though there are a lot of them, but that will definitely help to bring a better sense to the front, to the primary facades.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Devonshire?
In my opinion, much of the articulation comes from the original windows. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity to get rid of Orphan Annie and go back to the 3/3.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chen.
I guess the majority seems to be now preferring to go back to the original, so I would defer to the majority.
Okay, so we definitely don't have enough to vote to approve the 1/1 today. And I believe actually going back to the original configuration would be a staff level permit. So I think we can take no action and ask the applicant to continue to work with the staff. And I assume that any proposal for secondary facade windows would also be handled at staff level pursuant to the rules and would meet those rules. Okay, so we'll take no action on that item and we'll move to the next hearing item.
Okay, the next
Yeah.
item is
All right,
public
whoops.
hearing. item
Commissioner
number-
Lutfi, do you have a question?
So I just want to make sure I understand. So does that mean that they'll make individual applications and then they'll come to
So
us?
they can choose to do a master plan for the historic configuration on the primary facades, and that would be eligible for a staff level permit because it would be matching the historic configuration.
Okay, got it. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
That's great. Thanks.
All right, next item is public hearing item number 9, LPC 22-02413. An application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 1166, lots 13 and 14. 231 and 233 West 74th Street, the West End Collegiate Historic District Extension. It's a pair of Queen Anne style row houses designed by William J. Merritt, built in 1885 to 86, and the application is to reconstruct the front facades.
The applicants, sorry, commissioners, we're just waiting on the applicant. And you now have control of the presentation. You can click on the screen to advance the slides and state your name for the record. You may begin. So remember also to unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Name is Michael Notaro, architect, and we're here to present 231 and 233 West 74th Street. As Corey mentioned, designed by William Merritt in 1885. The buildings are comprised of red brick with narrow 3/16 inch mortar joints with very special terracotta ornaments in very good condition. The building has Ohio sandstone at the steps, at the base, and at the trim, at the retaining walls for the steps, at the building base, and trim and lintel elements. There are pressed sheet metal ornaments, there are slate roofs, and there at the back of the building, which is really not the subject of this application or this presentation, it's made of basically common brick, just so you understand the construction of the building. This was part of a larger row, which is now demolished, now defunct. The reason we're here is that we are asking for the public hearing approval for the reconstruction of the facades after a consideration of the options versus the option of restoration versus reconstruction. And we feel that reconstruction is the only way to address these buildings. You can see from the buildings that there's a considerable amount of this vertical displacement on the front facade. You can see it at the street wall, at the stairs, at the base of the building, at the tilting stairs, and at the lintels, at the top of the parlor floor, the second floor, the third floor, and so forth as we go through the building. This is a context photo of the building. This is a photograph that was actually derived from the 1940s tax photos, which serves as the standard for our reconstruction application. Through a series of piping mishaps from the 1940s on through the present day, that leakage has actually contributed to the vertical displacement that we are seeing at the facade in its present condition. So the standard for reconstructing the facade comes from two main reasons. Number one, safety in constructing these facades, or safety in restoring these facades under a restoration program, is a major concern. We do not feel, and our structural engineer also feels, that it cannot be safely restored. These lintels, which traverse the entire thickness of the wall here and on this level and on the top floor, have to be taken out. They've failed. They've got cracks in them, and that traverse the entire thickness of the wall. And safety is paramount. Number one, in restoring, and number two, the displacement in a restoration program would not be addressed. Feel that is a major distraction to.
Sorry, I think you just disappeared for a moment. So if you can just repeat that last sentence.
Okay, safety is a major issue. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, there we go. I don't know what happened, but safety is a major issue, and it's paramount in restoring these facades. And safety would be really compromised in a restoration program, and it triggers the need to reconstruct the facades. As you can see, the lintels are cracked and displaced. So not only the displacement is a major concern here, which serves as a major distraction to the historic features of the building. If we were to merely restore the facades, we would result in just a cleaned up version of what you see here, which I feel, as a preservation in our role as the preservation architects on this, would be a major distraction to the building, because once again, our goal is to restore the 1940s, restore the buildings via reconstruction to the 1940s standard. We have photographs taken in 2012, which is when we first discovered the major displacement, and we first discovered the panels of brick that were leaning and cracking and so poorly bonded to the backup masonry. We did Windsor pin testing, embarked on a program to study the inner layers of masonry to see if restoration was a practical way of doing this, just ignoring the vertical displacement for a moment. And what we found is that, number one, the Windsor pin test demonstrated soft conditions in the backup masonry, so that in order to restore it, we would need to, without reconstructing it, we would need to insert pins all the way through the face masonry, all the way through to the backup masonry, and really bolt the facade back into place. But once again, the mortar joints are the 3/16 inch historic mortar joints, and that would basically irrevocably mar the facade, because you would be able to see each location's pin. So those restoration techniques we feel would be inappropriate to restore it back to the 1940 standards, and both it would not correct for the major distraction, which is the vertical displacement that we see on the building. You can see the through cracks here on building 233. You can see the same cracks exist on 231. And you can also get a glimpse here of how much displacement actually exists. We measured the displacement. It goes up to a maximum of about 5 inches in the center of both buildings, where there exists a party wall behind the facade. We've worked with our structural engineer to develop, if this is approved, we have details that would take the party wall, which is still in serviceable condition, and we would anchor it to the newly reconstructed facade. These are some other photographs of some important preservation elements on the facade which have settled very badly. And once again, the owners of both buildings are looking to take them apart, catalog all of the components, and rebuild true and plumb in accordance with the 1940s tax photos. So the terracotta elements, which I alluded to before as being in really excellent condition, would be reused. The portions of any of the Ohio sandstone elements would also be taken down, cataloged, and kept in a safe, weatherproof location during the construction, and then reconstructed in its original location once everything has been cataloged. This is an example of how poorly bonded the face brick masonry is to the backup masonry, and also how soft the backup masonry is, making reconstruction, I should say, restoration of the facade not feasible. Again, ignoring for a moment the vertical displacement. The bow window, the rounded window on building number 233 is leaning outward. You can see by the corbels here, and just crumbling. So we have worked with our structural engineer to come up with, if reconstruction is approved, a very robust detail for this, which would not affect the aesthetics of it at all. We found that this panel also between 231 and 233 West 74th Street is also leaning outward, as you can see by the change in dimension here from the deteriorated face bricks from at the bottom of the opening to the top of the opening. We mentioned earlier the mortar has lost its tensile strength. The Windsor pin tests of the backup demonstrate that there's not much left. We've done a lot of cataloging of the facades of both buildings for the purpose of our application to landmarks. And then we have decided, along with the staff level, to request a public hearing for the reconstruction, because we feel that that's the only way to get back to the 1940s standard. This is a quick study to demonstrate to the commission that most of the facade elements are reusable. So most of the lighter colored elements you see here in the photographs, in the diagram here, are planned to be reused. So taken down, cataloged, salvaged. We can take the only difference is we can take the face brick and we can mix new face brick in with the old face brick, so that you can't really see where new face brick has been installed. It'll just be mixed in, so that you have an attractive blend which mimics the original configuration of the brick field of brickwork in the building. The rest of the dark colored elements you see here on the diagram represent the new material that would be necessary to complete the reconstruction successfully to the 1940s standard. You have here the pressed metal elements up at the top, and then above that you have the slate roof, which would all have to be replaced with new Vermont slate to match existing.
But not the pressed metal.
And Corey mentioned that the pressed metal. Corey mentions that the pressed metal elements largely would be reused as well. All of these, the curvature of the street wall, the settlement of the front steps, all of these elements during a reconstruction scenario would be corrected so that these elements would be built plumb and true. a diagram of what we had planned. We've got construction details to make the reconstructed element more robust than it was originally constructed, so that it would avoid leakage under the stairs. This is the street wall. Some of these elements need to be replaced with new Ohio sandstone. Finally, the photographs showing you the slate roof, which we feel is requires reconstruction done with all new materials. Pressed metal, largely salvageable and reusable. The end caps need to be reconstructed. We've studied the details and we feel confident that we can match the building integrity of the 1940s tax photos using largely the existing materials with the new Vermont slate 75-year product. The Ohio sandstone we checked on, and it is available in a multiple of colors, and the colors can be adjusted using tried and true techniques that can establish a patina on the stone to match our stones, and we would be able to really zero in on that when we dismantle the facade and clean some of the stones. We would at that point bring in the Ohio sandstone representative and get an exact match. These are two products that currently were sent to us. They're not quite there yet, but we feel that we can, it's not a challenge, that there are many ways we can match the existing Ohio sandstone. The brick, again, is some of it's bad, but as I indicated on the photograph showing where the reused materials would need to be replaced with new materials, but we found brickwork that match that matches the original building facades with no problem.
Okay, great. Thank you for the presentation. Commissioners, do we have questions at this time? All right, I don't see any questions. Let's see if we have public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you, and I will turn it over to Sonia Gior to take us through the testimony.
Thank you. Do you have several folks signed up for this item? We'll start with Kay Carpin from the Community Board. I'll be promoting you to panelist now. And if you can please unmute your mic and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Okay, thank you. We spent a long time on this proposal at the Community Board 7, and first of all, I want to say that the building has long been an eyesore and even a safety issue in that community, and I'm very glad to see it being addressed finally. We approved this application by a vote of 33-0 with 1 abstention. I think it's safe to say we did that with some fear and trembling with the idea of reconstruction. I applaud the idea of it if it can be done well and in keeping with the 1940s tax photos. Our approval is expressly conditioned, though, on a detailed inventory being kept, as has been indicated, including some extensive documentation and photogrammetry where appropriate, and that only salvaged material or equivalent material be used in the reconstruction. So beyond that, we defer to people who know more about this than we do, including the staff at LPC and you commissioners, to see about the how possible all of this is. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Our next speaker will be John Graham. I'll be promoting you to panelist now. And if you can please unmute your mic and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. John Graham for the Victorian Society, New York. We are often skeptical of proposals to demolish or deconstruct buildings because of supposed deteriorated conditions. In this case, the clear and careful photographic documentation of conditions has persuaded us of the reasonableness of this proposal. By committing to save all facade materials that are in reusable condition and to match those that aren't, we feel this proposal makes the best of a bad situation, and we support it. The need for the Commission to carefully monitor the deconstruction and also the details and quality of the reconstruction goes without saying. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. And our next speaker will be Sean Corsandi from Landmark West, and I'll be promoting you to panelist now, Sean. You could please unmute your mic and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Good afternoon, Commissioner. Sean Corsandi for Landmark West. The Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee is aware of the years of phone calls we've received regarding this pair of row houses, and we are grateful that the time has come to mobilize crews and return these buildings to their original glory. As a preservation organization, we must favor restoration over reconstruction. In a typical instance, measures would be taken to secure the facade prior to any required structural underpinning to correct any significant settling, deflection, or shifting of the structure. Instead, in this application, the team seeks a full rebuild. Our committee believes that the added stress on the extant fabric marked as to remain, which in the outline scope would need to be removed, brushed, stacked, stored, secured, all to ultimately join with other non-original materials in the reinstallation will lead to further deterioration than if the building was secured internally and restored as is typical. In instances of removal and reconstruction, our committee believes the 3/16 joint will grow. Even with the same materials, the structure will enlarge, throwing off the refined details and alignments of the original. While still further questions remain about the windows and doors, we must challenge the outline process. The Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee recommends the LPC prescribe restoration over reconstruction. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Helen Freeman from the Historic Districts Council. And Helen, I'll be promoting you to panelist now. And if you can please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Great. Hello, Helen Freeman, Historic Districts Council. HDC finds this proposed scope of work to be exceptionally well-intentioned and the detailed work of the design team to be very well considered and presented. We applaud this project. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we do not have any other people signed up to speak, and I don't see any hands raised presently. So I'll note for the record that we received 2 letters on this application, one from the West End Preservation Society, which agrees with the need to restore this facade, but is wary of a full-scale demolition of what is presently there. And another from a resident approving of the need to grant the applicant permission to demolish and reconstruct the front facade for safety purposes. I'll turn it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'd like to turn back to the applicant and ask if you'd like to respond to the testimony. Much of it was supportive, but there were some concerns from Landmark West and then the letters we received about the dismantling, and I think questions about how well everything will be secured, documented, and if in fact it really can be put back to the exact dimensions and details.
Okay. In order to address those issues, we have taken apart portions of facades before and cataloged stored in weather tight locations. And we feel that this is going to require some on-site storage and some off-site storage. And that is a soluble task that is able to be, it's a soluble issue. It's able to be undertaken carefully. Reconstruction of the narrow brick joints, we feel also is something that will not be a challenge, and we are prepared to do it. What I do feel is possibly an insurmountable challenge is the on-site restoration of this facade. How do you resolve the vertical displacement by shoring the facade, keeping things in place, pinning, and replacing selective elements of the facade, leaving other elements in place with the vast amount of vertical displacement that has taken place? It will result in a displaced product, which I feel will be a major distraction from the historic preservation of the facades. We feel that, and we request your support for the reconstruction of the facade, so that the facades are dismantled, not the entire building, just the facades. The front facade is dismantled, cataloged carefully, materials stored carefully, cleaned, salvaged, matched with, married with new materials of the same type, and a careful reconstruction be undertaken. That's the only way to get this back to the 1940s tax photo standard.
Okay. All right, commissioners, do we have any questions? Final questions? All right, so let's make a motion to close the hearing. Commissioner Chapin, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
And Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. All right, so first I will say that we have lost a quorum, so we will not be able to vote on this today, but we will still have a discussion and among the commissioners who are present, so that we can be sure of a specific direction, so that you can come back quickly, understanding that this is a somewhat hazardous condition that I think we do want to address in a timely manner. And I would also say that normally we would want to see primary facades stabilized and retained with necessary repairs and replacements made. And it may be technically feasible to keep some portions here, but I think the deteriorated conditions of these facades is quite severe, and major settlement in the masonry is apparent. And a lot of the masonry would have to be replaced in any event. So the applicants presented today a proposal to dismantle and reconstruct it, and they are, as they presented, committed to carefully salvaging and reusing as much of the masonry as feasible, and matching the details as closely as possible. So, which of course would have to be monitored with measured drawings and monitored by staff should there be an ultimate approval here. So let's begin begin our discussion. Commissioner Devonshire, would you start this one?
I am happy to start this one. I am possibly the most skeptical person on earth when it comes to restoration versus recreation, reconstruction. And when we first were shown those photographs of the building sort of in the background, and the applicant was telling us about all the cracks, I said, oh man, here we go. Someone's going to try and get one by us. In fact, once we saw those detail photographs, there is absolutely no question in my mind. First of all, the first approach would be to just skin this thing. Take the press brick off, because they're joined to the backup brick with diagonal bricks that are cut into the face brick. But the condition of the backup masonry system is so bad, and the displacement is so bad, that it would be a completely feckless effort. And the 3/16 inch joints, even if it was a situation where you could repoint the pressed brick, because those joints are so thin, that's one of the biggest problems that we have, is getting that kind of masonry system repointed without the knucklehead contractors. Not all of them are, but most of them are cutting the joints with grinders and widening them. It's a ubiquitous thing that just makes my skin crawl. The approach here that these folks have taken, first of all, I want to thank whoever this owner is for taking this step, and I want to congratulate the architect, please, for absolutely following the best approach possible. I'm sure, based on the fundamental information he's given us, I'm sure these things will get identified. The elements will get identified properly. They will get stored, salvaged and stored properly, hopefully somewhere where they won't get stolen, because this is really great stuff. I'm sure there will be people who are upset that they're getting rid of the asphalt coatings on the Vermont shingles, but you know, people who eat that stuff to get high deserve to be someone else anyway. In any case, I can't congratulate these folks more for what will absolutely be an award-winning project if they do it right, and it sure seems like they're going to do it right. The one thing that I would suggest is, rather than go after a Belden new brick, that press brick, salvage press brick is all over the place at salvage places. I would go after some of that first before I would go after a new brick, even good Belden brick. I'm drooling over this one. Thank you so much. I'm really sorry there's not a quorum here.
I know, I am too.
I want to take this guy out for a beer, man.
Okay, great. Thank you. Commissioner Lutfi. Oh, you're muted.
I knew you were going to start with Michael, and thank you for that. Michael, thank you so much for knowing so much and for your effusiveness about this. I am very excited about this project, and I defer to Michael, of course, but my gut tells me all the same things, that this is the way to go. It's going to take a lot of care and working with staff. And I think it's amazing that also that the owner wants to do this, and it seems like they have the right team to help them.
Great. Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, this is absolutely necessary. The building is in really terrible condition, and this is a great project, and just have to be done, obviously, with great care, but obviously that is the intent of the applicant. So sorry, we can't approve it today.
Great. Okay, thank you. And I'm sorry we can't approve it either, because I know this has been a condition for a long time, and I think the sooner they can start working, the better. And again, I appreciate all of the care that has gone into the assessment and the planning for the dismantling, salvaging, and reusing, and the discrete new materials where needed. And so we'll bring it back to the next possible public meeting and represent it to a larger group of commissioners, noting our recommendation to move forward with an approval. All right. So that's that item, and unfortunately we won't be acting. I'm thinking that We had one more item left, and I'm wondering if commissioners, we can just do that, even though there are only 4 of us, and that way we can give the applicant some feedback and at least keep them moving in the process. So we'll go ahead and do the final item.
Okay, and that is public hearing item number 10, LPC 22-12085, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 1378, lot 15. 714 Madison Avenue in the Upper East Side Historic District Extension. This is an Italianate neo-Greek style row house designed by Gage Inslee and built in 1874 with a storefront addition built in 1926. The application is to install signage and awnings. This was originally advertised with light fixtures as well, but those are accent lights that have since been determined to qualify for staff level review. So it's the signs and awnings that you'll see today.
And the applicant has joined the hearing. You can click on the presentation to advance the slides. State your name for the record and you may begin.
Good afternoon. My name is Margaret Kim. My apologies. I need to send this off to the first page. Could someone set it to page, the first page, please? Okay, thank you. I am a senior architect at Rand Engineering and Architecture. I am pleased to present the application for the limited facade alteration at 714 Madison Avenue. My client, Bucciolati, is a world-renowned luxury jewelry house founded in 1919 in Milan, Italy. They're crafting unique and important jewelry and silver items. Bucciolati opened its first store in New York City in 1952. And then in May of 2015, Bucciolati opened their flagship boutique in the current Madison Avenue location. For historic background, on the left side, we have the 1940 tax photo of the building's primary facade. In the middle, a photo of the 1980 photo. And then on the right side, a photo of the primary facade as it stands today. Here we have the historic map of the Upper East Side Historic District and the Sanborn showing the location of the property with its project description. And I will briefly, sorry. Could you please help me go back? Yes. So we are proposing the installation of new awnings at the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th floor windows. The new awnings will be similar to other properties along the retail corridor on Madison Avenue. On the right side, we have the existing building facade elevation. At the middle, we have the proposed primary building elevation, as well as a partial elevation of the 4th and 5th windows on the left. And then on page 5, I'll provide an enlarged elevation and section detail. Here on the right side, I have the existing building section. And then on the right side, the proposed building section with the awnings. Here we have an enlarged elevation and section of the upper windows on the left side. And on the right side, the awnings, awning elevation and section at the lower windows. The proposed dimension of the window awnings will be the width of the existing windows by 2 feet and 1/8 inches tall with a 9-inch skirt and constructed with a 1x1 tube steel and cladded with a sunbrella fabric. The color to match Pantone PMS 296, which is a navy blue. And the framing of the awning will be painted to match the fabric color. At the second and 3rd floor, which is the extended storefront, we're proposing to add a 4-inch tall white letter, the Bucciolati logo printed at the awning skirt. The awnings at the 4th and 5th floor windows will have also the same skirt detail without the logo. And then on this last page, I'm showing 2 precedent photos. On the right side is a 1940s tax photo of 745 Madison Avenue. The building has been demolished sometime in the 50s, 60s, in the 50s or 60s. This building has a similar 3-story extended storefront with awnings at the 2nd and 3rd floor with white letter logos. At this time, I've not been able to confirm if the ground floor tenants occupied the 2nd and 3rd floor. On the left side, I have a present date example of window awnings with white letter logos on the awning skirts at the upper window elevation at 764 Madison Avenue. This concludes my presentation for Bucciolati's limited facade alteration.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions, commissioners? All right, let's see if we have public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand so we can identify you, and I'll turn it over to Sonia Gior to take us through the testimony.
Thank you. We do have several folks signed up. We'll start with Friends of the Upper East Side. I'll be promoting you to panelists now. And if you can please unmute your mic and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Hi, this is Laura Variali representing Friends of the Upper East Side Historic Districts. Chair Carroll and honorable commissioners. Friends appreciates when long-standing tenants invest on their historic buildings, especially when the building is part of a lovely ensemble of 19th century townhouses that have been kept and altered in very similar ways. However, we do not believe the addition of dark blue awnings in every window of this altered row house to be appropriate here. Townhouses on Madison Avenue that were altered in the early 20th century do not usually have awnings on their 2nd and 3rd story storefront additions. Furthermore, Friends Preservation Committee does not believe the store needs any additional branding, as its name is very prominent on all the sides of the existing 1st story marquee. The proposed awnings significantly overwhelm this small-scale building and would detract from the character of the entire row. The neighboring buildings' awnings are significantly less noticeable due to their subdued color. We hope that a stakeholder as tasteful as Bucciolati will be respectful of this Italianate townhouse and its neighbors and remove the awnings from their proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. And our next speaker will be John Graham. And John, I'll be promoting you to panelists now. And if you can please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Good afternoon, commissioners. John Graham for the Victorian Society in New York. We support the proposal to install backlit signage at the projecting canopy above the ground floor storefront and small exterior light fixtures at the terrace and windowsills on the 4th and 5th floors, though it appears the lighting component may have been removed from the proposal. We also support, in concept, the installation of canvas-clad awnings set directly above the windows on the 4th and 5th floors, as long as the sides are open since the awnings are fixed. However, we do not support the installation as designed of awnings on the 2nd and 3rd floors. We can see in the historic photos that there were once transom windows above the display windows, but the glazing appears to be gone, and there are now opaque panels within the transom frames. Commissioners, awnings were historically designed to shade windows. It makes no sense to have awnings protecting plywood panels, and in any event, awnings typically were installed at the transom bar below the transom windows. We would be delighted if the applicants were proposing to restore the transom windows. If the applicant wants awnings at the 2nd and 3rd floors, they should be dropped down to the transom bar. In addition, all the proposed awnings suffer from appearing like little awning stubs. They should be deeper, extending at least halfway down the window openings, and should have a greater projection as well. They should look like awnings, not bits of canvas signage. Thank you very much, commissioners.
Thank you. All right. So we do not have any other signups in advance, and I do not see any other hands raised. So I will note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 8 recommends approval.
Okay, thank you, Sonia. I'd like to turn back to you, Ms. Kim, and ask if you'd like to respond to the comments we've heard.
Hello?
Yes.
In terms of the size of the awning, we are using the proposed or the precedents of other retail's awnings. So that was in terms of the scale. We modeled it after the neighboring retail examples. The client would like to see awnings at every window. So as we have it proposed.
Okay, and the example you're showing here in the tax photo is a 3-story storefront with awnings at the first and or second and third level at 745 Madison Avenue, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And there's, yes, and they clearly, it's not, the photo's not legible enough for me to read, but clearly it's some kind of lettering or logo printed on the awnings.
Okay. All right, any final questions, commissioners? We'll move to our discussion and give the applicant feedback. All right, Commissioner Devonshire, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion, which we will provide feedback for the applicants and then we'll have them back as quickly as we can. I will note that Madison Avenue has a very commercial character with row houses that had 2-story and in some cases 3-story storefront extensions added, 1 and 2 and sometimes 3 stories, as well as large apartment buildings and hotels with 1 and 2-story storefront bases. The 3-story projection is not as common, and there were, I think, were only a few examples along Madison Avenue, but they did exist, and we have a photo here of one at 745. The commission has rules or a master plan in place for to allow for staff level approvals for storefront changes on Madison Avenue, and the basis of those guidelines really recognizes and the changing commercial nature of Madison Avenue. And so the notion of awnings at upper levels of the storefront extensions are included. The reason this is before us today is because of the signage on the skirts of the awnings. And in fact, awnings at the upper floors are also something that can be approved at staff level if there is no signage, which in this case there isn't. So we're really looking at this because of the signage, but we can certainly comment on other aspects as we give them feedback that might make the project seem more appropriate. So with that, Commissioner Chapin, would you like to start?
Yeah, I was a little surprised when you said the staff could approve the upper level awnings, because unless there had been awnings previously on the upper part of a building.
So we can approve awnings on residential windows. Again, this would be without signage, but we can approve awnings on residential window openings. And so we have done that in the past, and on Madison Avenue, when a business occupies the whole building and there are no longer residences on the upper floors, we've allowed awnings of the same color so that it identifies it as part of the retail space, but without the signage, most typically without the signage.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you for that clarification, sir, because I was thinking myself that, well, we should just have awnings on the part that was clearly commercial, but I understand in this particular case on Madison Avenue, where the whole building may be commercial, that it might be appropriate. Because of the character of the building, the outer facade, I'd kind of prefer it to just be on the first 3 floors, but leaving that aside, because it could be approved at staff level anyway. I think that the signage is excessive, and if we have signs on the awnings at all, I think they should only be in the middle awning of the second. Well, I don't know, both the second and third. It's hard to tell without seeing an actual rendering, but
Could we go to the rendering?
I guess both the second and third. I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah, that's page 1, I think, right?
Page 3.
Page 3. 3, yeah, page 3.
Yeah. Well, I've got, I'm looking at the drawing, but to me, I'm thinking of seeing an actual, I'm sorry, a representation. Yeah, here, no, they don't have one with the awnings, do they? They have a drawing. But what I meant was an actual representation, not just a drawing. But anyway, I don't think that the side awnings, the flanking awnings should have signage on them. And I could go with either one on the second or maybe the second and third both.
Okay.
So that's my preliminary reaction.
All right, great. Thank you, Commissioner Devonshire.
I can agree with awnings on the second and third floor, and like Diana, signage on the central awnings. Although the staff can approve awnings on the upper 2 floors, I would sincerely hope that they would not.
Okay. Commissioner Lutfi.
Yeah, I'm just going to point a couple things out. I'm in agreement with what Diana and Michael said, but that 745 example that was used, which was on a different kind of building. Each awning wasn't particularly well done, but each awning had another part of the name of the business, which is a spa. So it was sort of like Madison Laser Spa 1, 2, 3. So this is different. So what's happening here instead is the building is now it has lovely, the signage at the base is lovely. It's also in the door, and it's just too much signage. And it actually, from a branding standpoint, I think it does a disservice to your brand. So I would say at a minimum, it should be, or at a maximum, it should be just the middle windows. If awnings are even necessary on the second and third floors, I personally wouldn't have them. But if they're going to be there, I absolutely would also recommend then that there's no awnings on the upper floors, and of course they would have signed.
Okay, all right. And again, the staff, the rules allow for the awnings at the upper floors.
Right.
Okay, but this is very helpful. So I think, we all will recommend that the applicant reduce the signage on the awnings, and we'll bring this back as soon as we can add it to another agenda in the future. All right, so that concludes our hearing today. Thank you. Thanks especially to you, Diana, Jean, and Michael for sticking it out and helping to give feedback on these last 2 applications, and hopefully we can bring them back very efficiently. And thank you to the public for participating today and informing all of our discussions. And so we will conclude today, and we will have our next public hearing on October 18th, next Tuesday. Thank you.